Hey everyone, welcome to this week's Q&A. A quick reminder, if any of you guys are in Melbourne this weekend, Ragdoll are playing at Cherry Bar on Saturday the 16th. I would love to see some of you come out and catch the show. I'd love to meet a bunch of you as well if you're in Melbourne. And Cherry is unfortunately closing very soon, so this is going to be the last time that we ever play there. So it will be super cool to have a bunch of you guys come out. You can find all the ticketing stuff on our Facebook page. Until then, let's answer this week's questions. So if you've got the opportunity to teach some guitar as a volunteer and you're wondering if you're ready, I'll tell you a little bit about how I got into teaching guitar. When I was 16, we had a family friend who was a couple of years younger than me, and she wanted to basically, learn how to play a couple of simple songs and get into playing the guitar, and her parents asked me if I would be interested in taking some lessons. And at the time, I didn't really feel ready. I was kind of like, oh, I don't know how to teach guitar, and what am I going to do, and what are we going to go over? And it's the best thing that I ever did for my playing, because teaching has been such a rewarding experience, whether you're doing it as a volunteer and you're not getting paid for it, or whether you're doing it as a profession like I do. It just connects you with that feeling you had when you first started playing guitar or when you heard music for the first time. And I find that whether you're teaching young kids or you're teaching adults, there's something really special about watching somebody approach the instrument for the first time or learn something new. So I don't think I've ever felt ready to do it, but the only approach I can ever recommend to anybody is to just dive headlong into it and try to enjoy the process, and keep in mind that you're going to be learning as much as the students are. Have I gotten into the vintage arcade craze that has taken over America? Not really. It hasn't hit super hard here. We've got the, slew of like Nintendo Mini and SNES Mini and Atari Mini and that kind of thing. I do have a Super Nintendo Mini because my first console was a Super Nintendo that kind of got handed down from a family friend, and I've got a lot of special memories attached to that thing. So when the SNES Mini came out, I sort of just had to have one. And I hacked it, so I can basically load any ROM on there. But you didn't hear that from me, and you totally shouldn't do that either. But in terms of the sort of like Pac-Man stuff, I have seen a little bit of it around, like I said, mostly on the internet, and it's not something I've really gotten into. And, I'm not really old enough to have gone through the whole arcade phase. I was more a console guy, so I can't see it as something that I'd really get into, although I do really want to own a legit pinball machine one day. That's more my vibe. What's the deal with the Dobro? That thing. We'll get to that in a second, but I'll answer your other question, Stephen, about keeping a journal. Not really. I tend to, basically, the way I like sort of remember stuff, I either take photos with my phone, which I sort of don't do a lot of anymore, but I'll use the notepad thing in my phone, and often when I'm on tour I find I get a lot of ideas for writing and a lot of inspiration like that. So I mostly write song lyrics when I'm on the road or when I'm traveling. It just seems to be a particular headspace that I get into, which is really conducive to wanting to express myself for whatever reason. So I do that. And yeah, the Dobro, it's essentially just like an off-brand, no-name kind of thing that got given to me. Well, actually got given to my dad, and then he passed it on to me. And yeah, let's hear it. Let's plug it in. I'll play a little bit for you in like Open D or something. So here it is up close. Obviously the big resonator, the cool kind of bridge so you don't bump the strings, the Firebird style pickup. It's got these cool sort of, I guess, sound hole inlay kind of things. And yeah, I mean, it's a cool kind of like slate color as well. I've been looking for a slide for like the last half hour, and I cannot find one, so I'll save the slide stuff for another week and we'll actually listen to it then. But just unplugged, this is in open C sharp. Kind of cool. I'm going to do some practice over the week, and hopefully for next week's Q&A we'll do like a slide lick of the week on this guy. Hold me to that, remind me about it as well. Can you use an OD pedal into a power amp like a Quilter and a cab? Yeah, definitely. If you saw my video with the Metal Zone Wazacraft earlier this week, essentially the best tones that I thought I got from that were running it into the effects return of my DSL 50. There's no reason why you couldn't run it into something like a Quilter or a Crate Power Block. In fact, I think the Wazacraft, I really liked the custom mode on it. It's essentially a preamp pedal. Like if you associate the Metal Zone with being a distortion pedal, I don't think that's the best way to use it. It's essentially a preamp pedal, and I think that's why it kind of sucks in front of an amp. It's like, there's too many gain stages or something going on. So cutting out your amp's gain stages and using something like a Metal Zone, you can use, you know, a Super Overdrive. I've done a little video on the SD one which covers that into the effects return of an amp as well, and yeah, sounds pretty decent, I think. A video comparing the Amplifier high gain amps and the Axe-FX 3 high gain amps, something I've thought about, something which is on the list, but it's not super high up on the list. I feel that there's been some other people who have already done this, and to me they're just, you know, different voicings. Like the Amplifier has one 5150 model, whereas the Axe-FX 3 has the 5153 50 watt, the 5153 100 watt, the original 5150 block letter, the 6505, the fractal take on the 5150 that they call the 6160, and it's got so many amps in there. So it's essentially going to boil down to almost like a comparison between the fractal and itself, and then one amplifier model. So that's been my hesitation with it, but there's enough demand for it. I would love to do it through the same IR, and you know, obviously I love the Axe-FX stuff. It's in its own league, but I think the Atomic stuff does sound really good as well. How does the Marshall Origin compare to the Marshall Vintage Modern? I did a really quick video that I called 2 amps, 1 riff. You can probably guess the reference there with my Vintage Modern and the Origin, and I thought they covered a lot of the same ground. The Origin, to me, you know, it definitely is a pedal platform amp. It needs something like a boost or an overdrive or a treble booster to really get the most out of its gain structure, whereas I think the Vintage Modern is way more of a plug and play kind of thing. The Origin, like I said in my review, it sits in this space between like a JTM 45 kind of sound and a 50 watt or 100 watt Plexi kind of sound, whereas the Vintage Modern to me is like an idealized modded Plexi or JCM 800 tone. Will I review the ISP Theta Pro or X? Have no idea. I don't even know if we get those in Australia or if there's a dealer, so that's something that I'll have to look into. If there's any of my Aussie listeners who own one of these, especially if you're in Perth, get in touch with me, and I'd love to put it through its paces, because I know Michael Sweet from Stryper has like a signature model, and I always enjoyed Stryper's guitar sounds, so there's obviously something pretty good going on there. Is there a plugin that emulates the ADA MP1? Not as far as I'm aware. The closest thing that I can think of is Mercurial's Reaxis plugin, which is a Triaxis emulation. Obviously the Triaxis sounds nothing like the MP1, and then obviously ADA have their MP1 channel pedal that they've put out, which I haven't had a chance to try, but Brett Kingman has a great demo video of that, and he pulls some really nice tones out of it. So that's probably the closest thing, but you know, I would love to see a company like Mercurial add, you know, an MP1 plugin. I would love to see an MP1 added to the Fractal products, and that's something that myself and some other users have requested quite a few times over on the forum. But until then, you can use my Axe-FX 3 ADA MP1 matches, and if you're an Axe-FX 3 user, of course. But yeah, unfortunately, no plugins for it. I think that would be a really cool plugin. I'd definitely buy it. This question was posted on my comparison between my Jet City and Soldano amps. It says, no clean tone? Not much of a review. Well, let's be honest. If you're buying a Soldano for the clean sound, it's kind of like buying a Lamborghini just to take the kids to school. It's not what the point is. Everybody wants to hear the comparison between the gain channels, right? So that's what I did. And, you know, if you want to hear a Soldano do a clean sound, go and check out my video called 5 Kilotones, Soldano Hot Rod 50, where I do it. But otherwise, you know, everyone wants to hear a Soldano with loads and loads of gain because that's what they are the best at. Alright, regarding the Matrix that is sitting in the rack with my Axe-FX 3, I've got the GT800 FX. It is a really great power amp. I've used it a bunch in situations where we have had, you know, crappy foldback, and before we started using in-ear monitors with the Axe-FX stuff. We also run in-ear monitors for drums and bass, obviously, and Ryan uses a Sans amp for bass, which is great, but we used to run, I'd run my AX8 into one side, he would run his Sans amp into the other side into separate cabs, and that worked great. And I still do that from time to time if there's basically a crappy PA in a room when you're playing small rooms. But luckily we're at the stage where, you know, the last bunch of gigs we've played have been in decent rooms, so I just go direct to the PA, either with ears or I get a feed from my stage wedge, and that does the trick for me. But the Matrix stuff I mostly use now to shoot IRs. It's a fantastic sounding amp. It's been super reliable for me, and I think for what you get, they're pretty well priced. So I'm definitely a fan, and just so you know, I don't have any affiliation with Matrix. I went and ordered one of those things just to use it with my Axe-FX Ultra, and it has been very, very kind to me since then. Okay, this week's Lick of the Week is a pretty quick one. I am down a half step, so keep that in mind if you're trying to play along. But let's just pretend we're not down a half step. So this one's going to be using the A blues scale, starting on the 10th fret of the B string. Then we're going to move up to the 12th fret of the E string, and then we're going to bend the 12th fret of the E string by a tone and a half so that it sounds like the 15th fret. Basically, it's root, 5th, minor 7th. Which is, you know, a super cool pagey thing rather than go... It's... So, doing that, we're then going to go down the blues scale. And then... So that's straight down the A blues scale. In this case, it obviously sounds like A flat. And then we are going to do the 11th on the G string, which is actually the natural 6th. So getting a bit of Dorian mode in there. And then we're going to go over to the 10th fret on the E string. So it's... And then to finish off, we are going to bend the 12th fret, which is the 9th note of the scale, or the 2nd note of the scale, by a semitone. Release it, and then go back down to the root note. So all up. There it is right at the end. There's a plane flying overhead at the moment. So we will sign off there. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. If you got questions for next week, get them in the comments below and I'll see you then. Cheers.